Jesus, who was the king of this universe, who lived in the palace of heaven, he came down to this earth. Jesus' sacrifice and his pain began when he grew up on this earth. But for the Father, his pain began as he sent the Son to this earth. In other words, Jesus' pain began on this earth, but the Father's pain began in heaven. When Jesus was young, he knew nothing, and he ran around and played like any other children. But for the Father to watch him like that, it was continuous tears and pain. After Jesus finished his public ministry, and he was caught and arrested. And he was taken to the court of Pilate. And there he received all kinds of false sin. Jesus was considered a family breaker. And they said that he stole God's offerings. And they said that he was a betrayer to the country. And he was also considered some false religious leader. Nobody wanted him. Religion didn't want him. The society didn't want him. So they had to kill him. And they made him into someone who only went to visit prostitutes like Mary. He wasn't even married. Instead, he only goes to see prostitutes. They said, he is the Messiah that has been prophesied for so long? Why was Jesus considered a family breaker? Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you must give up your mothers, your fathers, your sons, your daughters, your family. You must even give up all your land and even your own life, or else you cannot follow me. If you throw away your husband, wife, or children, is the family broken or not? Is the family destroyed or not? He destroyed the family. So is he not a family breaker? Yes, and those kind of things happened. And the pastors are making so much money. And instead of the pastors, the money, the people give the money not to the pastor but to Jesus. So is he not a thief? Yeah, he is somebody who's not even come out of religious school or theological seminary. And he's still taking all that money. So they called him a thief. And look at his life. He did not get married. He acts so clean and innocent, yet he always goes to visit prostitutes. And if he just meets any woman, he sits there and talks with them for so long. So when he went to the court of Pilate, he received all kinds of sins. And when he went to the court of Herod, he received even more sins. And when he went to the court of Caiaphas, he was even put more sin. And by the time he was sent to the cross, he received so much sin. And so finally, when the disciples saw what their teacher was going through and what kind of sins and crimes he was accused of committing, the disciples were ashamed. They were embarrassed. They could not bear to stand there. And so they ran away. And so they stripped Jesus naked, and they started to whip him. We must kill this sinner. Before he was captured, he prayed with tears, and he prayed even sweating drops of blood. He did not eat or drink. And he just prayed for them. And he was very thirsty. You know, when they will execute people in this world, they always give them a final last meal. And when they see people receive a good meal, or when they receive a good meal, they realize, oh, now it's time for me to die. But for Jesus, he was not even given a piece of bread or even a drink of water, and they just killed him. He was captured at midnight. He was dragged around from this court to that court. He had just sweat drops of blood for them. And yet, he was now whipped. The whips of the Romans were the most painful whips. They had bits of glass and steel at the ends of this whip. And there's no man that never collapsed and fainted after being whipped. So, at the end, it was all filled with barbs and glass. So, when they whipped, it would tear out the skin. And after he was whipped, he was dragged out and to carry the cross. He was tired, and he collapsed. And if he collapsed, they would whip him, and then he would faint. Then they would pour water on him. I hope here you will not see the Son. But I hope you will see the Father who is holding onto the hand of the Son. Every time the Son collapses, let's look at the Father who is crying. What sin did you commit that you must go through this? The Father knew that the Son did not commit any sin, did not even know what sin was, and was as innocent as a lamb. And here he is bloody and dying. And the Father saying, Son, wake up. This is the way that your brothers and sisters on this earth will be able to live. Get up. You know, when I was young, there was a family whose son was very, very evil. The parents worked so hard and sent him to college. And the parents worked so hard, but at the end, this son went to jail. And one time when he was being arrested, this mother went to where he was being arrested. And as he was being beaten, they said, don't hit him, hit me, hit me. And she instead embraced her son. When Jesus, who had no sin, who knew no sin, was being whipped and beaten, there was the Father holding him. And let's behold him. Later, Jesus completely fainted. And at the end, some other man carried the cross, and they dragged him like a dog up to Calvary. In Matthew chapter 27, it says that he was crucified. Let's look at the Father who is crying out, having to watch his son die like this. And they would take his hand, and they nailed that hand onto the cross. And they said, he is an awful sinner. He must be stripped naked and die on the cross. Being crucified was the greatest punishment. It is the punishment given to the most evil criminals and offenders. And not only that, they stripped him naked and they hung him on the cross. To the Son, the nails were being driven through his hands and feet. But to the Father, the nail was being driven through his heart. And those nails were stuck in his heart. Even a husband, even when her husband died, was stabbed, that knife was stuck in her heart. Then how can there not be a knife left in the heart of our Father who gave up his son to die like that? And if you read in Psalms, it says that they were like crazy dogs and they tore him to pieces. You know, crazy dogs do not attack their own owners. I hope that you will study well so that you will not end up becoming like those people who crucified Jesus like that. So, they nailed him on the cross, and when they lifted the cross, the weight of his body tore his hands and feet. At that time, he woke up and he said, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? My Father, why have you forsaken me? And those were his last words, and he breathed his last, and he died. When Jesus died, all of his pain was ended. When someone dies, after they're dead, no one knows. They do not know whether they are being kicked or hit. But let's look at the Father who must watch all of this. Then, how can his love not be thicker than the blood of the cross or stronger than death of the cross? This is a much greater pain and sacrifice of the Father. That's why it's written that black clouds cover the cross. And many people say that in their sermons, but they not even know what it means. What is that? That was the Father holding on to the Son, covering the Son with clouds. That was our Father holding on to Him. Will you believe this? This is the truth. The truth of heaven is not lies, but is all the truth. It's not something that it's imagined or made up. It is the fact. It is the truth. That is what it is to be the truth. Whenever I see the Father, who went through so much pain and sacrificed His Son in order to save me, and whenever I see Him, I cry so much. In the time of the Korean War, the North Koreans attacked us suddenly with weapons from Russia, from the Soviet Union. And even at that time, there was no way to stop them, because politicians were always fighting with one another. They came with Soviet tanks and weapons, but the South Korean people, they had old-fashioned guns or sticks made out of bamboo. And later they took young students, high school students, and made them fight. And they could not beat the North Koreans who had the tanks. So if parents, if the sons had to go out to war, they knew that they would not come back alive. And so they just waited the day when their children would come back, when they would hear the news that their children would die. My aunt is here. And my aunt lost all of her children except for one because of the war. And even now she says that God saved that one son. One time the police came to this family. Your son is a citizen of the Republic of Korea, and he must now serve his compulsory military service. The parents knew that when he grows up, he'll have to go to the army and serve military service. And the time came. After the son left, after that, the parents only cried. Mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, younger brothers and sisters, they all cried. Even everyone else in the neighborhood. Why? Because they knew that he would not come back alive. And this would be their last time. Last week, the next door neighbor's children, the cremated remains came back. And the other house over there, the cremated remains of that son came back. At that time, many young men died. It was one of the most pitiful wars ever fought. But in the same way, my daddy prepared for this war, prepared for this. But when he had to send out his son, he could not dare think about sending out his son. That's why he went through so much pain. And he could not make a quick decision. And yet, do you think the Father sent out the Son to die alone? Beginning from the manger in Bethlehem to the cross on Calvary, the Father followed His Son all the way. That's why greater than the pain of the Son is the pain of the Father who followed Him from the beginning to the end. A long time ago, when we went to the army, when I looked at my older brothers, they are 60, 7-year-olds. They had 3 ribbons, yellow, red, white. At the time, girls were very ashamed. They could not even look at guys. But when the train goes by with soldiers, they would all shake their hands and shout hurrah for them, because they would not come back alive. And the whole neighborhood would come out and cry whenever one young man was sent to military. So the day came when the news of their son's death and the ashes of the cremated remains came. This mother cried so much. Later, she went crazy and she just started to walk around the neighborhood crying out for her son. When the son died, when the son was shot and died, the pain was over. But let's look at the pain of the mother and father who had to imagine their son being killed. And when the son was shot, they could not see. When the son was shot, the parents could not see their son die. But our Heavenly Father saw everything from beginning to end. And that is why He was filled with such agony. Then, how can we not say that the love of the Father is not thicker than the blood of the cross or stronger than the death of the cross? When we know this love, when we accept this love, we will never sin again, and we will live a regenerated life. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. We must learn that love for eternity. And with such a great sacrifice, this Father gave us a Son. I hope you will not forget that sacrifice. I hope you will always thank Him. In true love, there's nothing false. When God said He loves you so much that He gave His Son to save you, then how can there be anything false in that? There's no false here. There's no false in true love. Like people say that we are heresy and error. Oh, the agony of the Father greater than that of the Son. The struggle of the Father more intense than that of the Son. The love of the Father thicker than the blood of the cross. The love of the Father stronger than the death of the cross. The love of the Father broad and wide than the whole universe. The love of the Father that neither the world nor sinners can ever comprehend. The love of the Father that neither righteous people nor angels can ever know. The love of the Father that is unknown to both heaven and earth. The love that no one knows except the Son and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal the Father. We are the Elijah today who will go forth with this love. When you go out with this love, that love will save this world and will allow them to go to heaven. But instead of taking out this love, there are all these false religious leaders who are preventing people from listening to this. Now, do you know who is leading those religious leaders in the world? And when those kind of people who would steal, commit adultery, kill people, they will come here and they become new people. And when pastors who come here, they become new people and they go back home. Instead of congratulating them, they said, "Oh, you fell into heresy." And they would tell these people and call them out in front of everyone and say, to admit that you admit to going and falling into heresy. And some are even beaten. At this time, let's remember Stephen, who looked to the Father and looked to the Son and gave up his life. Let's remember 2,000 years ago, just yesterday, there was a father who was holding on to the Son who was crucified on the cross and died on the cross. When you remember the Father and His love for us, then you'll be able to forgive everyone and you'll be victorious in love. And that's the way I have been victorious up to now. This love, hell cannot even take away. So let's remember how much the Father loves us. He went through much more pain and agony in order to save us. It may have been bothered if the Father was human, that He could die, that He could forget the pain. But instead, He could not. And He must feel that pain and agony to the end. And that's why His pain and agony was more intense. I hope that you will spread this love of our real Father to the whole world, and help it to all live with our Heavenly Father for eternity.